Very good morning to all of you. Well, I have been introduced, I am PVN Rao, coming from National Remote Sensing Center, Hyderabad. And I have been working in remote sensing applications area from NRSC for the last almost more than 25 years. And the topic that has been given to me today is, as you see it, on advanced applications of Earth observation and GIS for the benefit of governance as well as for citizens. And how much of these techniques are advanced techniques, I will leave it to you to decide, okay? Because you have been going through a lot of advanced techniques, as I understand, for the last few days. So you will be the better judges for that. And before we go into the formal part of my presentation, I would like to say that what NRSC is doing under Indian Space Research Organization is what exactly our father of space, Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, has been telling us. That is, we should be none in applying the advanced techniques such as space technology for the benefit of our own people and our societies. That is exactly what NRSC does. When I say this one, you will see why I am telling this one in my subsequent slides. Okay? And before again I go to what works we have been doing using space technology and particularly remote sensing techniques, I am not sure how many of you are well versed with remote sensing techniques. So very briefly I will touch upon a few slides, a few aspects that one needs to know about remote sensing related aspects. So without taking any further, I think I have some 50 minutes or so. Okay. Well, what we are trying to do by way of looking at remote sensing data is, what we are trying to do is, it is essentially an inversion problem what we are trying to address. There is a sensor working from one of those space orbits. It looks at the Earth and captures in the form of a digital image whatever is there on the ground. So the actual physical features have been converted into a few digital numbers that could be varying from 0 to 255. Now the task of an application scientist is to bring it back to the feature on the ground. So in that sense, it's a pure inversion problem. Digital numbers to be converted back to their features on the ground. Whether it is a cropped area or a built-up area or a water body or snow-capped mountains, that is what we need to do it. Apart from that, we also need to retrieve some of those parameters, physical parameters. That could be sea surface temperature, land surface temperature, or soil moisture, or crop-related biological parameters, and also how best this data can be used for addressing some of the processes like evapotranspiration. So this is the task of an application scientist in front of him when he says that he is working with Earth observation data. So this slide summarizes exactly what I just now said. So you have satellite data coming from satellite platforms. Information is what is captured, and we need to convert that first into information, and the information need to be converted into knowledge. So that is where the domain expertise comes into picture. An agricultural scientist who can look at the same data and then derive information related to his agricultural aspects. An oceanographer can look at the same information more or less and then retrieve the ocean related parameter information. So like that, we look at the same data more or less, same data acquired by the sensors, and it is put to all sorts of applications, whether it is in agriculture, water resources, land resources, geosciences, urban studies, or even in disaster applications to provide all important information on near real-time basis and provide it to those people on the ground to take necessary relief measures. So that is where the utilization comes. So how best we derive the information and how best we convert that information into knowledge and how best we pass it on to the users in the field. That matters very much. Well, I will not spend too much of a time here, but most of the times what we are dealing with is whatever radiation coming from the sun, when it incidents, either it is reflected or absorbed. And of course, transmission is also there to some extent. Then there is some emitted component of the electromagnetic spectrum that also hits the ground. And then we also have the radiation emitted from the ground itself by virtue of its temperature. That is one thing. And then if you have an active sensor, like a synthetic aperture radar, it sends the pulses, microwave pulses, and whatever is reflected or scattered, so to say, that is received again by the sensor and that is interpreted. So essentially we have three processes when it comes to dealing with the electromagnetic radiation. One is the reflected radiation, the other one is the emitted radiation, and the third one is backscattered radiation. So these three radiations spread across the electromagnetic spectrum from visible NIR region to middle infrared to thermal infrared to microwave. So that is how we deal with the radiation in terms of remote sensing. When I look at optical data, particularly when I say optical, I mean reflected component of the electromagnetic radiation, that is visible and near infrared essentially. And when you combine the information coming in near infrared, red and green, and try to display it together, you see what you are seeing on the top left. That is, vegetation is seen in red color, and then water bodies are seen in dark black color, black manifestation, and some of those features that are appearing in white or bright cyan, they are the fallows or urban areas like. So this is how the interpretability of the data goes up when you combine the data coming in different wavelengths and then put it together on a display. You will be able to discriminate features better. In fact, that is what our eye also does. We also look at the world in, of course, not in near infrared red and green, but we see it in red, green, and blue, essentially. And since vegetation has got high reflectance in near infrared band, wherever NIR is dominating, you can almost, without much doubt, infer it as vegetation that is playing its role. So wherever red is there on the image on the top left, it is vegetation in different stages and conditions. Now, at the bottom left, you are seeing a black and white picture that is microwave image. In microwaves also we have multi-frequency concept like what we have in optical data, but it is not that popular as it is in optical data, because the factors that influence the microwave radiation are so different from optical data, how it interacts with the features. We need to be concentrating more on the physical dimensions of the targets that are interacting with microwave pulses, and then the electrical properties in terms of dielectric constant. So when you combine dielectric behavior of a target and the physical dimensions of the targets, that is when the microwave interaction takes place, either very strongly or not so strongly. So wherever you have the geometric aspects coming into picture apart from the dielectric constant, there you will see the reflection taking place or backscattering taking place in different ways. When a smooth feature such as a water body under normal calm conditions is there, and when a microwave pulse hits it in an oblique manner, then what we see is a specular reflection, and no signal comes back to the sensor, and so the target appears dark. That is what you are seeing on the bottom left. And wherever there is a double bounce kind of reflection, features appear very bright, and that is the case with the settlements. Concrete built up area will be appearing bright. Then we also have at the bottom right the thermal infrared image, and purely by virtue of the thermal state of a feature, the emitting radiation would be very intense or not so intense. And for example, if you are looking at clouds, clouds are, as we all know, that they are quite cool at a very low temperatures. So on a thermal image, you should expect the clouds to be appearing dark. And sand, for example, during daytime, it is very warm and very hot, so it should appear bright. So the property that is there behind this one is the thermal inertia. See how much of the body is willing to change its temperature is what we measure in terms of thermal inertia. And when once thermal inertia is very high, then its change of temperature is very low. And where thermal inertia is very low, then the temperature changes are very high. So that is what is exploited normally when we are dealing with thermal IR data. And in remote sensing applications, what we normally try to exploit is, depending on the application that you are keeping in mind, whether you are working at a regional level, national level, or at a local level, we will be selecting the data. And when you talk of data selection, suppose I wanted to look at features that are changing fast for a larger area like the entire country, what I need to have is a high revisit capability of the sensor, and that should be giving me the data either on daily basis or once in 2 days or once in 5 days sort of thing. So suppose if I am trying to monitor, for example, a very easy to understand example is clouds. If I am trying to look at clouds, clouds are not static, they keep moving. So you need to have much frequent observations. So for that purpose we use geostationary platform based sensors. They keep collecting the data once in every 30 minutes. And so you will be able to see in which direction the clouds are moving and so on. And that helps us in our weather forecasting related applications. Whereas if I am looking at something like an urban feature which doesn't change much, but I need to know the building related details, I need to have very high resolution data. I should be able to capture, say for example, a building is there. First of all, I have to detect it, and then I have to say that the building is of this much height with 3 floors or 4 floors. So that needs much higher resolution data. And to make the discriminability that much better, we need to have multispectral data. That is what we have already seen how it helps. So depending on the application that you are keeping in mind, we need to select the data, and that is what we do. And in this context, all 4 so-called R's are important. When I say R, it is resolution. You need to have temporal resolution, you need to have radiometric resolution, you need to have spectral resolution, and then spatial resolution. That's important one. Okay, I do not go into those details. Okay, now here what we do, we try to see remote sensing as one of those sources of data for interpretation. And we all know that there is Geographic Information System, GIS, and both Earth observation community, say coming from ISRO-like institutions, while they are concentrating more and more on EVO observations from satellite platforms, the government organizations as well as the private institutions, entrepreneurs, they are quite active in GIS applications. And GIS takes data from multiple sources. Remote sensing is just one of those sources to feed in. What GIS does is, it gets the data from multiple sources and then puts it together in whatever form you want it, you can manipulate it, and then apply certain rules based on your knowledge with the application that you are trying to put the data to use, and then develop certain models and then get the result what you are expecting. So GIS helps you in that sense. In the past, whoever is using remote sensing, we used to depend more and almost to the negligible levels on information coming from other sources. We try to retrieve more and more information by looking at remote sensing data in multiple ways, or bringing in other remote sensing data to go with say optical data and try to get the information. But of late, because of the developments that have taken place with the IoT, I would say that it has helped immensely the remote sensing scientist or analyst in taking help of such other sources, whether it is data coming from navigational satellites for location of various features, or mobiles based on your developments in the internet and the speed with which we are getting the data. That has immensely helped in using remote sensing data, and I must say that it helped us a lot in deriving information with more accuracy and reliability. That is what this particular slide shows you. You start with remote sensing data on the top left, and using your domain knowledge. For example, here a geologist can interpret the data and generate the groundwater prospects map, and that is what you are seeing at the top right, adjacent to the FCC satellite imagery. And then when you infer certain features into a usable knowledge, for example, given a location, if a remote sensing analyst, a geologist, interprets it as an area that has got immense potential for groundwater for drinking purpose, and that is where you can put a bore well. And in order to make certain supporting factors to get collected, a person can go to the field, and then using a mobile app, you can collect some more information and make your predictions or inferences from satellite data that much more accurate, and then use it. And such information, when you are generating from multiple themes, when you are using all those multiple themes, for example, when I say that groundwater prospects map, I think I will come to that later. So information is now coming from different sources, and that is all being integrated in the GIS environment. And what we do here, we create databases, and then we find out applications, and using the tools available in GIS, we develop solutions, and those solutions are applied to various sectors. So socio-economic security could be one of them, and the disaster risk reduction related aspects could be another thing, and providing tools for efficient governance. All this may lead to sustainable development at the end. So this is how we are looking into the whole issue. Well, what are the applications that we put both EVO as well as GIS? If you look at, we do it for mapping and monitoring, which is I think how we all started when we talk of remote sensing or earth observation. And then the sectoral applications. It is not just mapping, but mapping with a purpose under various themes. That is what we do, and I have examples for each of those things, what we have been doing. And then disaster management support. Disasters are the ones we have been facing almost every year in some of these states. Unfortunately, some of these events are increasing as the years are passing by, and that you will see in one of the later slides. Then we have geospatial web products and services like Bhuvan. Bhuvan provides so many services, and that are being used by not just the ISRO or its centers, its associated centers, but even public is also using quite a lot. Then of course I already mentioned the mobile apps. Then the most important thing, apart from what I have already mentioned, is you need to have the necessary capacity built with skills developed across the country, because the country is so big, and one organization like ISRO cannot cater to the whole country's requirements, or a few state remote sensing centers what we have across the country cannot cater to the whole requirement. So you need to have the necessary capacity built to make full use of the satellite data that is coming in huge volumes on daily basis. And how this left side block is catering to various aspects is captured on the right side. It is addressing the national programs, like I said, disaster management support program, which is launched by ISRO for collecting the data and interpreting it and passing it on to those disaster management authorities. Then technology institutionalization. You don't do. You also pass it on the skill to other institutions where they can do it themselves. So that is what is being done. And then promote this technology awareness. And then you also provide the necessary applications on Bhuvan, where others do not have the necessary infrastructure. They can just make use of by logging into the Bhuvan portal and looking at the resources available, being made available by ISRO, and some of those tools that you can use to extract the information that you are looking for from the data itself, from the data that is sitting there on Bhuvan. You use that data as well as the tools for deriving more information, which perhaps you are better equipped to draw. And then of course there are a number of mobile apps, like I mentioned already. All these things are helping in addressing various security aspects, whether it be water security, food security and shelter, then health, infrastructure. All these things are with the ultimate tie-up to the so-called sustainable development. And then when we do this, and when we produce the results in the form of visible outputs spatially, not as a point output, then it brings in automatically the transparency. And once transparency is there, accountability is also there. And when once you are seeing it, you believe it. So in that sense, it helps in overall governance. So the governance is now with geospatial knowledge rather than a few numbers in terms of statistics. So that is how the whole program of Earth observation is happening from our side. Now going into some of those examples here, you can see that we have the applications in land resources, and for any developmental activity or even to address disaster related things, first of all what we need to know is what is where and how it is. This is very important. So in that sense, we need to know what are the land use land covers across the country, maybe at different scales. Sometimes you may need it at a very coarse resolution, say of 1:250,000 scale, or even coarser, 1:1,000,000 scale, because we do use this sort of data in, for example, weather modeling. Weather modeling doesn't need data at a very large resolution. Large scale maps are not required for that. You need to have coarser resolution, but at a more frequent time scale. So you have to generate information at different scales such that it meets the requirements of all users. That is what we do when we map at 250,000 scale using AWIFS data coming from ResourceSat platform. Then we do this on annual basis because annual changes need to be captured. And as I understand, you have different land use land covers exhibiting different values for the so-called parameter albedo. Albedo is the reflected radiation to the total incident radiation. If you broadly put it across. And when you measure that one, it helps you in energy balance related studies. So in that sense, it has a very important bearing on what it has to do in terms of whether it be climate change or weather forecast modeling. We need to have that information. Now, for many planning purposes, we need to have the same land use land cover information at better scale. So we do it once in every 5 years at 50,000 scale for planning purposes. Now we are moving towards mapping such land use land cover information at 10,000 scale. And 10,000 scale, when I say that, we need to have detailed land use land cover information for implementing certain decisions taken using the planning level data inputs. So for implementation purpose, we need to move towards larger scale, that is 10,000 scale, that is being done. So you also have to look at what is happening to some of those lands. For example, we keep finding some of the lands when you traverse across the country, we find vast expanses of land that is not put to any use. And that need not be a wasteland, but maybe we are not using them. It could be wasteland as well. So you need to have a clear inventory of your wastelands in the country, because the pressure is increasing on the government to put more and more land to use, whether it be for agriculture or for plantation or for greening the country. In many ways, we need to look at the available resources, which is mainly one of those things being the land. So we need to have a good inventory of land. That is what is being done under wasteland mapping at 50,000 scale. And when once you know that these are the areas, we have the land unused, but nearby supporting resources are available. For example, water bodies, are there water resources nearby? And then communication network. Nearby some of those wastelands, do we have communication network? Then what happens? You can consider some of those potential lands for putting it to, say, industrial purpose. You can bring some industry and then start there. And to start industry, you need to have electricity coming there, you need to have water availability, you need to have communication to that place. So in that manner, to select suitable areas, you need to have the knowledge of wastelands. That is what is being done. And similarly, land degradation, for example, land loses its fertility and productivity over a period of time if you don't manage the lands properly. So what is the status of a land that is being put to, for example, agricultural purposes, whether it is in good condition or not so good condition? If it is not in good condition, how best we can improve that for sustaining its productivity? So like that, various applications related to land use land cover you can see. On the top right image example is for wasteland mapping. You can see that over a period of different years, 2008-9 to 2015-16 at the top right, you can see what used to be only a wasteland has converted a part of it to solar power plant, and that is expanding, and it has been taken as one of those examples from the state of Gujarat. You will find many such examples across the country where the land is being put to better use. And the wasteland atlas like that has been generated for the whole country, and that has been released recently. And the wetland mapping is another important. Wetland ecosystem is one of those very, very important aspects that we need to preserve, and what is happening to the wetlands of the country, and how we need to take the necessary measures for keeping them in good condition is another aspect. So when you generate this kind of information on land resources, where it is being used, a few examples are given at the bottom right. Net sown area of the whole country, both in monsoon season as well as the following Rabi season, can be assessed, and that is an important input for the policymakers. And then the natural resources accounting is another important aspect. Then you have spatial information for planning, that is another application. Then it is supporting those national activities, whether it be Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sanchay Yojana or the NAPCC National CC Climate Change. So that is one thing. And we all know, we all have been hearing about various sustainable development goals, which are 17 and that need to be realized by 2030. And this is a decision taken, and India being a signatory to the Paris meeting in 2015, where we agreed to, where we committed to addressing the 17 sustainable development goals, and how those goals are being supported by way of this information. If you look at SDG 2, SDG 7, SDG 13 and SDG 15, those are the ones are being supported with this information. When I say for example, when I say SDG 1, it talks of the no poverty should be the goal we should reach by 2030. And then another SDG, if you look at, the employment opportunities should be given, and gender equality is considered as one of those SDGs. So like that, and then clean drinking water and clean and affordable solar energy. So like that, we have about 17 SDGs, and each of those activities are catering to some of those SDGs. Well, then we have a lot of schemes taken up by the Government of India for rural development. And one of those things, I am sure that everyone in this hall must have heard about MG Narega, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. Under that one, the unskilled rural labor is to be given a minimum of, initially I think it was 100 days in a year, but now it is increased to 110 days if I am not wrong. So how that scheme is being implemented, whether it is yielding good results or not. If you have to look at that one, again the information technology and the space technology is coming to a big help. What you can do is you develop a mobile app and capture what is happening on the ground, and then send it to a Bhuvan-like portal and do the necessary analytics on the data, and see whether the data is, whether the interventions taking place in the name of MG Narega, are they being optimally used or not, whether they are distributed across the country the way they need to be distributed, realizing the need of various aspects in such locations. So that is what the technology is helping. And in addition to that, we also have another major activity called Integrated Watershed Management Development Program, IWMP. What it does, what are the objectives of IWMP? If you look at it, it tries to address three important aspects. One is restore groundwater. That means by means of our interventions, we should be able to recharge the groundwater. You all must have heard and read from papers that one of those studies by NASA using GRACE mission, it says that the groundwater resources are depleting fast in the western states of both Haryana and Punjab. So if such things are happening, what is that we can do? You take up projects like IWMP. You bring in necessary interventions on the field such that groundwater is recharged by putting, say for example, check dams, by putting percolation tanks, by putting agricultural farmlands. So such interventions are required. And then the vegetation, greening of the country is another important aspect, and the kind of plantation that needs to be brought into the picture is another important aspect of IWMP. Then soil is getting eroded. When one soil gets eroded, its productivity comes down. Whereas when the country is facing the need for more and more food production, and if the soil is losing its fertility, you need to do something to restore it. That is what these three main objectives are the ones driving the IWMP. So what is the role of NRSC here, or the Earth observation data? You monitor, you see whether the interventions are taking place in the proper direction or not, and what kind of change it is making. For example, I have put the necessary check dams across the rivers or streams, whether it is increasing the groundwater table or not. So these are the things that we can certainly do it using the satellite data. This is what an example for what I just now said. For example, on the right side picture, you'll see that in 2009-10, it is more of a barren land, not much of plantation there. But by 2016, you could see that there are plantations that are coming up with those circles in the form of dots. Those are the plantations which is adding to the greenery and overall greening part of that one. And then if you see at the left side of the diagram, there are no ponds such as what you are seeing here. So these are the interventions that have been taken place during this IWMP project implementation. Well, this is another example. Under MNREGA, ponds built for recharging the groundwater. If you can see that all along the river, if you observe in the next one, you will see that the new ponds have come into the picture. Okay, and that helps in recharging the groundwater for summer days, for example. And then how do you keep tag on these things? That is where the mobile apps are coming into picture. Somebody goes with a mobile, using the mobile app, he captures a picture. Along with the picture, he also collects the actual location of that particular feature on the ground in terms of latitude, longitude, and then you get additional details. What are where it is and how it is and who has captured and all such and when it was captured, all such time stamping and location related information are captured, and that helps in monitoring what is happening on the ground. And suppose under MGNREGA, I was talking of transparency and accountability that is coming into the picture. When you have this kind of information captured and when it is accessible to the decision makers or the one who releases the money to the local people who have claimed to have done the work, they can see whether work is done or not by way of looking at this one. So that is how into the governance you are bringing in the necessary transparency, and if some wrong claims are there, you can make people accountable as well. So that is what we are seeing here. Then this is another example here where the check dams have been built across the streams. So you can see that the kind of change that has taken place, and these are all the check dams that helps in doing. And the check dam sizes, if you look at, they are anywhere around 120 meters to 150 meters across the streams, bigger ones, and of course 60 meters kind of dimensioned check dams are also seen. And moving on to agricultural related applications, it is finding its application in many ways when it comes to agriculture. First of all, we need to know what crops are being cultivated across the country, and for that purpose remote sensing is perhaps the only tool to do it very efficiently, and that is what is being done. The necessary technology has been developed by ISRO and it has been transferred to the Ministry of Agriculture, and the MNCFC under Ministry of Agriculture in Delhi, that is now routinely doing the inventory of 8 major crops across the country, and then providing the necessary information to the Ministry of Agriculture for taking necessary further steps. Then we also have another technology developed for assessing the drought situation in the country. And drought is a common feature in some of the states and not so common fortunately in other states. And you can make the assessment itself as well as the conditions that may be leading to drought vulnerability and what kind of risk the area might be facing in terms of drought occurrence. So that sort of assessment you can make. Then we also talk nowadays and hear about the biofuels. And biofuels, for example, if you have paddy residue after when its growth cycle completes and harvesting takes place, we see that a lot of paddy residue is left out in the field, whether easy to useful for converting that into energy. That is what one attempt has been made under a TIFAC supported project. What we assessed is the whole country's bio residue, how much of residue is being produced by way of if paddy is cultivated over this much of area, and after putting some of that residue after harvesting, how much of it is left out as unused residue, whether that residue can be converted into energy. That is the kind of assessment you can make. For making that assessment, first of all, you need to know where is the crop cultivated, what crop is cultivated, how much of residue is used for other purposes like manure or for any other cooking purpose or any such purposes, and then you make an assessment of how much is left out. And when you burn, for example, 1 kilogram of such residue, how much of energy can be generated. So when you make this kind of assessment, you are telling people this much of resources are available to convert into bioenergy. That is what has been done, and the inputs have been given to the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Then we also have the need for increasing the food production, because demand for food grains is increasing day by day. But if you look at the country across, you will see that some of the areas are cultivated only one season, whereas other places there is cultivation going on for 3 seasons. And if some areas are cultivating only for one season, what about cultivating it in the other 2 seasons, or at least in another major season in Rabi, for example? That is what we call the crop intensification. So if an area has cultivated crop in monsoon season, that is Kharif season, and if it has not cultivated major portions during the Rabi season, we can make an assessment. What are the areas crop has been cultivated during the first season, and how much of it is still cultivated in the second and not cultivated in the second season. And the difference tells you the fallows in the sense uncultivated area. And now again, using your domain knowledge, looking at those uncultivated areas in the second season, make an assessment whether the area which is not cultivated during the second season, can it be brought under cultivation during the second season also. And to bring it under cultivation during the second season also, what are the requirements? First of all, what crops can be cultivated when there isn't much moisture left in the field? Suppose there is no irrigation facility to take up crop in the second season, but are there any crops that we can cultivate by using the residual moisture left from the previous season in the soil? For example, pulses. We talk of green gram, black gram kind of crops. They don't need much water to cultivate during the entire season like paddy or like sugarcane. What we can do is, we can cultivate such crops with the moisture left out from the previous season's paddy cultivation. And so now the next step is, the domain expert, an agricultural scientist, will be in a position to tell whether the weather is suitable for cultivating pulses with whatever moisture is left out in the field, or any other soil, for example. Soil, is it suitable for cultivating? So this sort of information he brings in, that knowledge he brings in, and then he recommends where pulses can be cultivated out of the left out fields which are not cultivated. So in that sense, you can bring additional cultivation during the second season also. For this, the important aspect is, you should be able to make a spatial assessment of the area that has been cultivated in the first season and left uncultivated in the second season, and then your domain knowledge. So when we bring in all these things, either in a GIS environment or by using your conventional knowledge, you will be able to put the land to maximum use even during the second season. But main important inputs for such an action, such recommendations, come from remote sensing by way of earth observation. So this sort of activity has been carried out for the 6 eastern states of India, right from Odisha, West Bengal, Assam, and 3 more states in that fashion. So, when we do that, it helps in providing the food security, and then it also provides additional income to the farmer during the second season when he cultivates, and it also helps in improving the land quality in terms of being more nutritious. So, in that sense, we are trying to work towards a sustainable agriculture by way of improving the health of the land as well as by providing more income to the fielders, farmers. And now let us touch upon another very important application in agriculture that is developing these days. When you have high resolution data coming at a much more frequent interval, say once in every 2 days or once in every 3 days when you are getting the data with high resolution of say 1 to 3 meters, you are able to look at individual fields and also assess the crop condition. And here is one example for such application. You have this is I think this is wheat actually cultivated in these patches here, and you have one example here and another example coming from here, and you can see when you are monitoring it at a high frequency of say in this example where what we are showing is much more than 15 days. Once in every 5 days the data has been collected, and when you plot the so-called normalized difference vegetation index for these two selected plots, you can see the profiles. One is having high NDVI, which indicates a good crop, and the other one is not so good crop with lesser NDVI values all along its growth profile. So, when you ultimately look at what is the kind of yield those plots have given, this is the kind of difference you have. Now, when you have high resolution data coming at high frequency in terms of time, then you are able to make an assessment in realistic sense the kind of development different locations of the plot is crop is going through. That helps us in stratifying the whole cropped area into different strata, such that some strata tells it's a high yielding zone, and the another one may be telling it is not so high yielding but of poor quality yield that you are going to get. So this helps you to make a realistic assessment of the yield that you are going to get and ultimately the production what we are going to have for such crops like wheat. So this is one important application that is getting translated into the so-called crop insurance what we are talking and hearing about. For example, when you have an assessment of this sort carried out continuously, and when you build the necessary database across the years, and when for a given location, for a given crop, when you have the statistically built information, you know that what are the normally expected yields, and then on any given year, if the yields are deviating from the expected yields, that tells us whether you are going to get a very good bumper crop or the crop is suffering due to any of those influencing factors. Unseasonal rains can bring down the yield to at a later date, or crop stress due to lack of sufficient moisture can bring down the yields. And based on the kind of database what we have and comparing the this year's performance with the expected performance, you will be able to assess the kind of anomaly that is there, and that helps in a farmer when he claims, for example, my crop has failed and I need to be given the necessary crop insurance related benefit I should get. You are in a position to make an assessment, say whether the farmer's claim is right or not so right, and then accordingly you can provide the necessary inputs to the decision maker. That is what we have been putting efforts in developing such geospatial technology inputs for crop insurance. it has different aspects, it has different components to go with. For example, you need to have sufficient input data coming from multiple in multiple aspects. You need to have the necessary cadastral layers. That is what is the most important aspect. And then the weather, soil, irrigation related details, and then crop and seasonal reports we need to have, satellite based crop area we need to assess, and so on. When once you have this crop inventory generated, you will also be able to stratify it as per the crop growth and its expected yields, and then you will be able to look at how the area is area discrepancy we can assess. Suppose if somebody says that this much of area is cultivated under so and so crop, we will be able to assess whether it is right or wrong. And if the yields, somebody claims they are not to the expected level, we can also verify that one. And this information will help in settling the crop insurance claims. So you have more efficient and transparent crop insurance mechanism in place, and web-enabled decision support systems we can develop, and then it supports, of course, the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana in that sense. Well, when we move on to water resources applications, you have the snow cover area is being mapped, and then snow fraction is being mapped, which is one of those essential climate variables. And when once you have snow, and when snow starts melting, you know that how much of water is going in the form of runoff, and which is a major source into the rivers for water, that we need to have a forecasting mechanism. That is what you can do with the satellite data. And then you also have an assessment of reservoir sedimentation you can make, and so on. When you look at different applications, whether it be in terms of inventory of water bodies or inventory of assessment of snowmelt runoff, or by modeling exercise what we do, like using a WIC model, a variable infiltration component model. By using it, you can make an assessment of what is the runoff, what is the soil moisture in the root zone, and what is the evapotranspiration, like parameters you can assess, which are going to be helpful again in managing your water resources. So that is where we are in a position to use earth observation data again. Apart from that, using high resolution data, suppose if irrigation infrastructure is coming up, then at what stage the infrastructure is, whether it has been completed or not, whether it is on schedule or not, that sort of assessment you can make. For example, if this is a canal coming up, there is still the gap that needs to be filled in. That can be assessed here. And then when once the irrigation infrastructure is in place, whether water is released into those irrigation canals or not, and whether the fields are receiving water or not, you can make an assessment. And then what kind of impact it has made in the irrigated command area, you can make an assessment by way of the crop that is cultivated. And another important application that has been recently completed is the reassessment of water resources available in the country. Last time such assessment has been made was in 1993, and after that in 2017 the entire country's water resources have been assessed here with the help of satellite data again. Well, this is the example I was talking, and you can see that when irrigation infrastructure was somewhat less, this is the kind of area that has been under cultivation. When once the infrastructure has come into this Jurala project area, the kind of area that has been irrigated and crops have been cultivated has improved. And this sort of assessment we can make again from satellite data. And the water resources that what we have in terms of the surface water bodies is an important input and important information for various applications, including aquaculture. So you need to have continuously monitoring water bodies and their extent, how the water is there, and for how many days water is there in a year, whether it supports, for example, fish cultivation throughout the year or not. That sort of assessment you can make again from satellite data. This is one such example. Well, using the irrigation demand related requirements to address, we need to have the information coming on both crop and soil, weather, and other soil moisture conditions for supporting the crop. And in order to do that one, we need to use various hydrological models, and that is what has been done here. And then where and how much of water is required, that is being given on daily basis by using a customized hydrological model for the state of Andhra Pradesh, and the same exercise is being now taken up for other states as well. Well, we have again the forestry related applications. Forest biomass is an important input, and what is the carbon stock that we have in the country is another important input, and where the forest is losing its forest cover, we need to make a continuous assessment at least once in every 2 years or so, and for all that we have again satellite data coming into picture. If you see that year-wise 2014 to 2019, how the number of locations in a forested area have lost their forest cover, this number is quite significant across the country when you see it over the years. And then the satellite data coming at different spatial resolutions in multispectral as well as in micro data helps in making forest working plans, how to manage your forests. For that purpose, the important input comes from satellite data again. And then we have another important applications, a few applications in geosciences being, like I mentioned earlier, the groundwater prospects. And in order to arrive at this final map of groundwater prospects, we need to have all this information. Lithology map you need to have, geomorphological map you need to have, and the land use land cover and the slope which is derived from DEM is required, and hydrology map is required. When once all these layers of information is available to you, you integrate that information, and a geologist based on, hydrogeologist based on his domain knowledge, he will be able to convert this combined information into the groundwater prospects maps, and this happens in GIS environment again. So we use satellite data in deriving multiple themes and then arrive at the specific application. That is what we are seeing it here. And it also helps in how groundwater levels are depleting over a given area. And one such exercise has been done for ISRO Center, Satish Dhawan Space Center, which otherwise known to all of you as SHAR Center, is what has been carried out. And the recommendations have been made where to put water conservation zones, water conservation steps you need to take, and where you can dig a borewell for supplying necessary water to your requirements. And similarly, the work can be put to use in mineral prospects, and also it helps in assessing the landslide susceptible zones, and early warning can be generated for preventing any major events by way of giving early warning about the possible landslides. Another important application when it comes to urban studies is the so-called Amrut project, which is being now currently executed over 500 cities by generating geospatial layers of all that information attributes. And you can see that at 1:4K, 4000 scale, geospatial database is being generated using high resolution satellite data of sub-meter resolution, and whatever that you can interpret from the satellite data itself, all those features are captured and annotated properly, and this information goes to the urban local bodies of a given city or town, and the urban local bodies add some more information from the field, and then that information, when it comes back to the executing organization like NRSC, they integrate all that information what they have derived with what information that is coming from the ground, and then that helps in generating the master plan for future development. So using high resolution data for about 500 cities, out of 500 cities, 240 cities, NRSC is carrying out such Amrut project related master plan development related inputs it is generating. So high resolution data utilization is one such thing you can see here with this example. And then we have urban growth. With time, cities are growing, towns are growing, and are they growing in a specified manner such that it is good for the urban environment itself? That is what you can monitor by looking at the satellite pictures of those areas at some regular intervals. What we do it here is once in every 5 years we map the growth, and that information is helpful in planning the future activities. Well, I was mentioning earlier the disaster management support related inputs are a major activity again with ISRO under disaster management support program, and NRSA is generating information on various natural disasters on a regular basis, such that we try to provide near real-time information when an event strikes. So, for example, if you see here, the 2017 to 2019, the number of states affected due to floods that increased from 8 to 10 to 14, and the number of districts that affected also is increasing. And this is what is being captured using either optical data when it is the cloud free, or synthetic aperture radar data which penetrates the clouds and then gives the flood inundated areas. And then we also need to have the kind of flood forecast using the satellite inputs and other knowledge, and that is what is being attempted. And the near real time with about 3 days early warning, the flood forecast is being generated for Godavari and Mahanadi river basins, and this is being expanded to other river basins as well. Kerala floods have been captured, and real-time information has been provided to the local authorities for taking necessary steps. And then when cyclones occur, they also cause damage that needs to be addressed using a monitoring mechanism, whether you do it with meteorological satellites, and then the kind of rainfall that might have happened, and the inundated the areas that needs to be captured. And because of the strong winds, local infrastructure might have damage that needs to be captured, which again happens with satellite data. And this is one such example for cyclone Vardha that affected the coast of Tamil Nadu. Well, different aspects, you can see how many trees have fallen, you can capture, and then you can also use the crowdsourcing option for capturing what is the real situation on the ground, and then populate that information to Bhuvan Like portal, which is accessed by the authorities for taking necessary measures for providing relief or repair. And this is an example with the Hudhud cyclone which hit the coast of Visakhapatnam. Well, another important activity we keep doing on a regular basis is the active forest fire alerts we generate. Using the moderate resolution satellite data coming from sensors like MODIS, VARS systems, using 16 orbits data on daily basis, the nationwide forest fires, if they are occurring during the forest fire season in the country, that normally extends from January to June months, the active fire locations are captured, automatically the data is processed, and the location information is sent for the whole country from all these 16 orbits within 30 minutes of satellite pass. And that information is now going to the Forest Survey of India, FSI, and they in turn disseminate that information to the concerned beat constable in the concerned forested areas. And this information is being generated for last 7-8 years, and as the spatial resolutions of the satellites is increasing, we are able to capture more and more such events, and pass on the information as quickly as possible. Like I said, within 30 minutes the information is now going. These are the landslide inventory that has been carried out for the state of Kerala when 2018 events occurred. And we can also, by modeling, we can also generate the necessary landslide susceptibility zones and then prevent people taking any shelter in such areas. Then various geo platform applications that have been useful in governance is put here for your information across various aspects, whether it is urban, water, agriculture, and so on. The number of applications that are available from various platforms is captured here. These are some of the examples. One of those things being Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, where when a beneficiary is building his or her house at a given completion stage, the money is directly transferred to the beneficiary by the authorities with no intermediate role by any agents or any other contacts. And you can capture the events such as yoga and all yoga day related events across the country. Then these are basically the mobile apps, how they are helping in geo governance. Well, with EVA applications, we are under various disciplines, whether it be agriculture or disaster at the end. We have been supporting various ministries by providing the information. Some of them are on near real-time basis and some of them are on a long-term basis, like static information what we have discussed already. And major activities under each of those disciplines, like Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sanchay Yojana or Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana when it comes to agriculture. Similarly, in other areas, the activities are supporting the overall need in terms of governance and for the benefit of society and to the citizens in general. So you have benefits to the government, you have benefits to the citizens, you have benefits to the community as a whole and to the industry, and benefits to the overall society. So without going into the details how it is helping each and every sector, we can safely claim that sufficient effort is going on in catering to some of the needs, but there is much more scope, and we can definitely do much more to help each of those sectors with more and more timely availability of data in general and high resolution data in particular. And our dependence on some of the foreign satellite, high resolution satellite data is quite large, but we should be able to do it much more better way with our own satellite data coming in that resolution also in the coming days. Thank you very much.
Sir, for the crop mapping, which satellite data NRC get and what is the frequency?
Sir, we use for crops like paddy, we use AVIFS data, advanced wide field sensor data, and that comes once in every 5 days. And with 56 meter resolution data, we do that one. And when, again, like I said, depending on the application we have in mind, we need to choose the sensor. Okay.
So regarding the forest fire, one of the slides you have shown to us, can this type of the information, your technology can help us to prevent the forest fire? After the forest fire, mapping is fine.
See, I think
that is fine, but can the prevent this type of the thing much in advance?
I think you asked a very important question, because on this aspect there are different impressions with people across the country. And when you look at, we did not have time to actually go through that complete slide, but in India, 95% of the forest fires reported are man-made. They are not natural, unlike in some of the developed countries. These are all man-made fires. And fortunately, these fires are not really damaging the forest stand. A tree is not dying. These forest fires are ground fires. Whatever undergrowth is there, that is the one that captures the fire, and then it burns. So the actual tree doesn't suffer. And whatever a temporary effect is there, that is, that effect is gone in about 3 weeks to about 3 to 4 months time frame. In fact, I have some more slides also to show that how these are not permanent effects when forest fires occur. And then if the forest fires are to occur, what we can do is we can make an assessment of the weather conditions and the moisture levels in the field, in the forested areas, whether the conditions are conducive for the forest to catch fire. That is what we can do. We cannot actually predict forest fire happening, but the conditions that are they conducive to catch fire. And then suppose if winds are strong, that can spread easily. If the conditions are very dry, winds are also blowing, and the season is summer, then what happens? It can spread easily. So conditions we can make an assessment, and then if any preventive measures can be taken by the local authorities when actually it happens, or to prevent, it has to be ground activity.
Excuse sir. Yeah. Sir, I wanted to know more about two of the products. One is the snow cover and snow fraction, and other one is related with the hydrological output that is being given. So, like, how are these calibrated or like verified, and the details of the product, like, is it on daily scale or weekly, or yeah?
See, when it comes to, I think when you asked hydrological modeling related outputs, it is being generated on daily basis, and then at different grid sizes. And when it comes to the ET, there are attempts to cross compare with other products. That is one way of doing it. And then under the National Hydrology Project, what we are currently doing, actual validation by field measurements is planned, and that is what is going to be done for that one. And the snow cover can be captured using optical data, also supported by the SWIR data, and that is what is being done. And then snow fraction is only a derived parameter from snow cover. Suppose if you are having a 1 kilometer product of snow cover, then 3 by 3 matrix you can take of 9 pixels, and then you can compute the snow fraction. So it can be done. Yeah. Snow depth, as of now, it is under R&D with us. Because again, you need to penetrate, and that penetration comes from microwave sensors. And microwave sensors, particularly SAR-like sensors, we need to use for that purpose. We need to develop that technology. We don't have yet that. Yeah. I think let Madam ask. Yeah.
You're preparing the base map for some of the Amritsar.
Correct. Yeah.
Even in government of Karnataka, we are looking after the Amritsar, and the base maps were prepared by Karnataka State Remote Sensing Agencies. I would like to know how the cadastral is superimposed on the base maps, and is there any difference, shift in the cadastral, because the nalas are shown in the cadastral map also, and when it is when the base maps were prepared, maybe the paths have been changed. So how you are looking into it, sir? Like whether any applications were made on that? So which one you are considering, whether the cadastral map nalas which are shown in the cadastral map, or whatever is actually existing on the ground? Because we know like the National Green Tribunal is also, and we have to leave a buffer also on either sides. So which one you are going to consider, sir?
It's an involved question. I am not an expert on that particular topic, but let me tell you what we are doing, and we have not yet addressed that component yet. What NRSC is doing while doing this Amrit project for 240 cities is, we are generating that first level product where whatever features you can derive from the satellite data, we are mapping at 4K. And then that information is going to the urban local bodies. And they try to bring in, if they have cadastral maps available with them, they bring in that information. That is when we need to integrate that part. And we have not done yet because we haven't received back any, we have not yet received any such inputs from the ULBs yet. Our part is going on, but you know that ULB's part of Amrut activity is quite involved, and that on yes, yes. NRSC is expected to do that component also. Yeah, it is not done yet. And whoever is giving, all of them do not have the cadastral maps. That is the limitation again. That second part, it is available. Under Amrit guidelines, yes, it is there. Yeah.
We will
But
take
exact example of showing it to answer her question, I need to talk to the concerned scientist because I don't work in that area. I am only bringing in works of my colleagues. Okay, but I can come back to you because you are from Karnataka Remote Sensing Center. We can come back to you. Okay. 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 Maybe you can write to me. Just pass on your email address to me. I'll come back to you. Okay. I'll talk to one Dr. Venugopal is the one project director for that Amrut. I'll talk to him and get you the details. Okay. rav_pvn@nrsc.gov.in. That is my email address. Yes.
Sir will be available after tea break, please.